Who else survived besides the Targaryens? We hear several times about the death of Valyria for 100 years before the action of the series begins. A volcanic eruption destroyed this ancient state. Most of the inhabitants and dragons died, but the Targaryens knew to flee thanks to a prophetic dream of one of them. While watching the original series, we assumed they were the only house that managed to do so, but that wasn't the case.
House Valyrian's origins reach back to old Valyria. More ancient even than House Targaryen, according to some texts.
The House of the Dragon features the Velaryons, another family from old Valyria who fled with the Targaryens. Although the Velaryons are mentioned in A Song of Ice and Fire, they only play a small role as a house supporting Stannis Baratheon. Therefore, they are left out of the screen adaptation.
They'll bend the knee or I'll destroy them.
Why did Aegon conquer Westeros? Many decisions in Game of Thrones are made out of a lust for power. We're told that Aegon Targaryen, who conquered Westeros and became the first ruler of the Seven Kingdoms, did so because the Judicial Commission wanted him to.
Forgive me, Khaleesi, but your ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror, didn't seize 6 of the kingdoms because they were his right. He had no right to them. He seized them because he could.
And because he had dragons.
Well, having a few dragons makes things easier.
So there you go. But even though that's what the history of Westeros tells us, House of the Dragon gives us a different answer.
Our histories. They tell us that Aegon looked across the Blackwater from Dragonstone, saw a rich land ripe for the capture. But ambition alone is not what drove him to conquest. It was a dream.
Aegon had a vision of the White Walkers and the Long Night. It led him to believe that the Targaryens and their dragons should be in power when the time came. He passed the prophecy on to his heir, and the tradition has been kept alive in the House of the Dragon.
This secret, it's been passed from king to heir since Aegon's time. Now you must promise to carry it and protect it.
Who was Rhaenyra Targaryen?
Welcome back, Princess. I trust your ride was pleasant.
Try not to look too relieved, sir.
It's worth another spoiler warning here. Although Rhaenyra Targaryen and her intrafamily civil war are mentioned several times in Game of Thrones, in a spoiler-filled scene in Season 3, Joffrey gives Margaery a family history lesson and discusses Rhaenyra's fate.
Do you like to see where the last Targaryens are buried?
Are you sure Lady Margaery doesn't find all this a bit macabre? Oh no, it's quite all right, Your Grace. I'd love to see their tombs, really.
Shireen Baratheon mentions the Dance of Dragons again in Season 5.
What's it about?
It's the story of the fight between Rhaenyra Targaryen and her half-brother Aegon for control of the Seven Kingdoms. Both of them thought they belonged on the Iron Throne. When people started declaring for one of them or the other, their fight divided the kingdoms in two.
However, we never get any information about the character herself and why she feels entitled to claim the throne that has traditionally been held by men. House of the Dragon finally gives insight into their actions, showing that she had every right to the king's chair.
Princess Rhaenyra.
I'm Queen Rhaenyra now. And you all are traitors to the realm.
Is Harrenhal truly cursed? Harrenhal is an incredibly dark place introduced in the 2nd season of Game of Thrones.
What kind of fire melts stone?
Dragonfire.
During Aegon's conquest, the future king riding his dragon roasted the castle, incinerating the lords holding it after they refused to surrender. Since that day, Harrenhal is said to have been cursed, as many of the families who owned it suffered an evil fate.
Built in hubris by Harren the Black as a monument to his own greatness. Blood mixed into the mortar. It is said to be a cursed place.
Despite its appearance and heritage, the Dragon House shows that it is not cursed at all, or at least probably not. Larry Strong uses the castle's reputation to his advantage by setting a fire that kills his brother and father. Who knows what other atrocities have been committed under the cover of the curse?
I feel certain you will reward me when the time is right.
How many dragons did the Targaryens have during their heyday? And we thought 3 was a lot. It is said that before the Dance of Dragons, the Targaryens were at the height of their power and had the largest number of dragons Westeros had ever seen. For those wondering exactly how many dragons there were, Daemon explains it in the Season 1 finale.
We have Syrax, Caraxes, and Melis. Your sons have Virmax, Arax, and Tyraxes. Baela has Moondancer.
Daemon, none of our dragons have been to war.
There are also unclaimed dragons.
The Blacks have 13 of them, including several unsaddled, and the Greens only have 4. Unfortunately, their numbers have already begun to dwindle. Arax dies at the end of the episode, along with Lucerys when Vhagar stitches them out of the sky. Daemon also says that they have 20 more eggs on Dragonstone, but when they will hatch, and if they will hatch at all, is unknown.
Half of them never do, you know. What? Hatch.
What happened in the Essos after Doom? Essos the Doom and Aegon's conquest is mentioned in Game of Thrones. There is a period in between that is not mentioned.
Fire and blood.
The Targaryens didn't just run from the destruction of their home to the conquest of Westeros. After the fall of Valyria, a period of strife known as the Age of Blood began in the Essos. It involved conflicts in the former colonies of Valyria, which became the free cities of the continent, as depicted in Game of Thrones.
I've heard Marine has become a free city. You might run into trouble if you try to fight slaves in the fighting pits. Now, if you were to fight freedmen who would be paid a wage...
As narrated by House Dragon, Volantis attempted to become the ruling city. Before he could receive the title of Conqueror, Aegon sent Balerion to Essos to turn the tide against Volantis.
A toast to Aegon the Conqueror, your exalted forebear, who joined our cause against Volantis in a century of blood. On the great dragon Balerion, he flew to our aid in Lys and burned a fleet of enemy ships, thus turning the tide.
How much control did the Targaryens have over the dragons?
Akaris.
In Game of Thrones, Drogon shows his temper before Daenerys becomes his rider. After that, they act as one, perpetuating the belief that the Targaryens were masters of the beasts. However, House of the Dragon calls this into question.
The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. They're a power man should never have trifled with.
Viserys believes that their power over the dragons is only an illusion. His rightness is confirmed in the finale, when neither Lucerys nor Aemon can gain control over their beasts. It depends on the rider. Dragons often feel what their rider feels. Daemon, for example, seems to have an incredibly strong connection to Caraxes, but to claim that Targaryens can completely control them is completely false. Where did the dagger come from? All Valyrian steel weapons are rare, but one of them played a far greater role than anyone realized.
You're not supposed to be here. No one's supposed to be here. It's a mercy. It's dead already.
Otherwise, it would have been first used in the attempt on Bran Stark's life. This dagger was later used by his sister, Arya, to defeat the Night King. Due to its role and the fact that it is not connected to any particular family, we wondered about the history of this dagger.
That dagger once belonged to Aegon the Conqueror. It was Aenar's before that. And before that, well, it is difficult to know.
And so it is. It originally belonged to Rhaenyra Targaryen, a dragon lord who fled Valyria with his family. It was then passed on to Aegon, who inscribed on it his prophecy, which only manifests itself in fire. In addition to the prophecy, the Targaryens passed the dagger from heir to heir.
From my blood come the prince that was promised, and his will be the song of ice and fire.
How did the Targaryen Civil War begin?
Dance of dragons. Why is that a dance?
It's just what they call it.
Doesn't make much sense.
I think it's poetic.
As we all know, the Targaryen Civil War, or the Dance of the Dragons, was a war for the throne between Rhaenyra and her younger half-brother, Aegon II. Knowing that it was a war for the throne, legacy meant that King Viserys would not come out of Season 1 alive. But it didn't turn out to be that simple.
You hereby name Rhaenyra Targaryen, Princess of Dragonstone, and heir to the Iron Throne.
In House of the Dragon, Rhaenyra is poised to inherit the throne until there is a misunderstanding between Viserys and Alicent. Even when the Greens stage a coup and crown Aegon, Rhaenyra wants to avoid war and bloodshed at all costs.
Aegon.
Our son.
His dream. The Song of Ice and Fire.
Unfortunately, the death of her son, Lucerys, by the hand or dragon of Aemond looks like it will be the catalyst for the deaths of many more. One last mystery, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss similar videos in the future. How did the prophecy survive?
In the ancient books it's written that a warrior will draw a burning sword from the fire. And that sword shall be Lightbringer.
The prophecy about the promised prince was an important factor in Game of Thrones. It was first told to us by Melisandre, and it told of a mythical warrior born to stop an impending threat to the world of the living. However, we now know that this prophecy was not just something generated by Melisandre's religion.
When this great winter comes, Rhaenyra, all of Westeros must stand against it. And if the world of men is to survive, a Targaryen must be seated on the Iron Throne. A king or queen, strong enough to unite the realm against the cold and the dark.
Aegon had a similar vision and knew that a prince or princess would be born from his lineage. The prophecy came to us by word of mouth as the Targaryens passed it from heir to heir. Red priests and priestesses preached about it in the Essos.
Daenerys Stormborn is the one who was promised. From the fire she was reborn to remake the world.
While we don't know how long ago it became part of Melisandre's religion, Aegon's own dream gives it more weight.
Promise me this, Rhaenyra. Promise me.